Alright, this is a video to Kurt Hardesty. Now, he made a video called Science is a Religion. Now, Kurt Hardesty is in the spiritual vein. He's a friend of, um, what was his original name? Anyway, it's John, the guy that was trying to be the Joker for a while. It slipped my mind at the moment, his original name. But John and Jane Doe. He's a friend of his, and he has this sort of a mystical outlook. And I have some severe differences with your position, Kurt. On the other hand, I think I believe in spirituality, and I believe in following the spiritual feeling, and sometimes I have despair with what I perceive as a blindness among people trying to feel their way along that path, and but I'm glad they're trying, because I think a lot of us are ignoring it. I think that religion as we understand it, the Judeo-Christian religions, and to various degrees, other theisms and religions, is sort of a rape of a proper spirituality, and we need to find our way back onto a decent spiritual path. And for me personally, that path is the path of natural philosophy and learning from nature as it presents ourselves, and being honest with what we see. And when we come up with an idea but then we see something that contradicts it, go with what we see and come up with a new idea, as opposed to ignore what we see and stick with our idea. So people, no matter how desperately they're groping for spiritual answers, I tend to have a soft spot for that. And I think Kurt's intentions and basic, I don't know, spiritual spectra is something that he's in the realm where I have hope for it. So this is a video to you, Kurt. Sorry to talk about you in the third person, but maybe you know how that goes. So one thing I wanted to say, and hopefully I'll put a link to his video, is that people need to keep in mind that scientists, well, actually, before I start, I've talked a lot about science with Barklord, and Barklord is one of the few people that's convinced me to change not just rhetoric, not just the way I say something, but the way I'm thinking about something. And a crucial point was, in my defense of science, as if science was natural philosophy, was this idea that that I characterize science as as a certain subset, and it was when I was thinking about Archimedes and how militaristic a lot of his career was, or Leonardo da Vinci, who was more of an engineer, but still just how militaristic that was. And I used to think, well, that's people taking stuff from science, taking E equals mc squared, and exploiting it, raping the ideas and turning it into a bomb. And the thing with Archimedes is like, no, Archimedes was into it. That is one of the drives that leads to what we call science. So, I'm still looking for the proper terminology, but I'm just going to retreat a bit into natural philosophy. The point is, it's very similar to me going into the forest and listening very closely to the emotions and feelings I have in that environment. It's natural philosophy, and if you keep looking closer and closer. Now, do experiments become a part of that? Yes, that's just looking very carefully at our perceptions from Mother Nature. On the other hand, there's a thing about science where there's certain perceptions you have to ignore in science as we understand it. I don't believe in ignoring, because I want to do a natural philosophy that acknowledges the spiritual feelings, this feeling of having a spiritual experience. So, given that, I would say, it's important to remember scientists don't all think alike. There are dogmatic scientists, and there's been sometimes centuries at a time where certain scientific ideas held sway for enough generations that it definitely was dogmatic. But what has happened in science is that there's ways around them. So a dogmatic scientist, or a whole generation of dogmatic scientists, will slow down progress in studying nature. So a dogmatic scientist is working counter to natural philosophy, to the investigation of nature, to spiritual progress, to psychological progress that is driven by a study of nature, which is what I think natural philosophy is. So a dogmatic scientist retards progress in natural philosophy. But the scientific method, as we understand it, which is, other people don't seem to understand it too well at all, but say Thomas Kuhn's idea of the scientific process, will overcome that. Inevitably, it will overcome that. You can only hide the truth so long, because I just made a video about the Big Bang, and the thing is, you could come up with a theory like that, or the Copenhagen explanation of quantum theory, and it might hold sway for a while. People might take dogmatic approaches in order to believe it, since it's hard to explain. They just kind of have to memorize it and believe it and say, ha ha ha, you're an idiot if you don't believe this thing that we don't understand. But the scientific method, as it has evolved, is well past the point where they're still telling the new scientists to question everything. And even if they're dogmatic and think, well, not that, that's not supposed to get questioned, it does get questioned. And the biggest glory in science comes to overcoming the biggest beliefs. So there's still glory and a method that keeps chipping away at dogmatism. And if the dogmatic idea doesn't match up with nature, eventually the dogmatic idea falls, right? And so if you have a theory that can't be supported, but people are believing it, maybe because they got educated or it was popular or all the, groupthink kind of reasons, there is a part of this system that is just working against that. And it can take quite a long time if people are going to be really stubborn, but it will fall. So it's important to remember that not all scientists think alike. In fact, they think very, very differently. And that's why you can, in fact, find scientists that don't believe in climate change and stuff. You are encouraged to have your own ideas in science. Now, you might not get funding. You might not get a good job and things like this. So those are subtle human influences that cause people to give in to the dogma. But on the surface, they're told, you should think for yourself, and that's what they at least have to pretend to do. And through this process, at the very least, you get new scientists that actually believe the hype and will attack that dogma. And then when they can demonstrate their point about why the dogma is wrong, they win. And Einstein is a perfect example of that. Einstein overcame just centuries of belief. Copernicus, Galileo, they overcame centuries of belief. And it's because even through the religious era of the West, we have had natural philosophers developing this obsessive position that you can't tell nature what to do. You have to ask her what she does. Okay. So Kurt brings up this issue that one thing that we found in materialism is that all boundaries are fuzzy. I've said that before myself. And so, it's like at your skin, you've got molecules going off. And I mean, is the water in my body, in my blood, is that part of me? What about when that water molecule goes off? How long until what if it's still in my skin? When is it not me? All the boundaries are fuzzy. But there is a thing in astronomy called the point spread function, which is the shape of that star, right? The star should actually be point-like, it's so far away, but you always get this fuzzy boundary. Now, in principle, the point spread function is continuous, so it goes out forever, and yet it's only bright enough to see for a certain width, right? But then again, if you have more sensitive instruments or more sensitive eyes, that width might be bigger. If you less, you might be smaller. So where does it really end? Nowhere. I'm everywhere. We are all one. But there's still a point spread function. It's still brightest in the center. And if you looked at it from the side, you have you'd have a curve. And sure, the curve might never officially, in the mathematical form, go down to zero, but it gets pretty close to zero pretty quickly, right? And then because of quantum mechanics, you don't have this continuity, because since that curve is being filled in with a speck at a time, it actually will be zero, because there's going to be gaps in things because of the quantum nature of the elements that fill in that curve, that provide that curve. And then if you have a detector, you'll find, well, it's spiky and stuff. You have all of these photon events, and they'll fill in. It's like they'll color in that curve, but they won't do so within the lines. There'll be some dots. It's all point-related, and some of the dots will be outside that curve. All right, and so humans have fuzzy boundaries, but we're still localized. We have a spread function, right? And so we can have locality, even though we might officially be connected to the whole universe. And even if you ignore the fact that the whole, quanta nature of things appears to mean, you might have a real boundary. No part of yourself might be in the other part, of the galaxy or in another galaxy. Even if you accept, well, no, I'm a continuous creature. I'm the curve, not the quanta that are filling in the curve. That's just the phenomena that reveals me in light. I'm this continuous function. You still have locality, because you're intense. My spread function is intense right here. Over here, no. Over here, less so. Way over there in Hawaii, hardly nothing at all. So I'm not equally everywhere. So if science is a religion, what it has going for it is it's not a dogmatic religion. Now, maybe you have a generation where 99.9% of everybody calling themselves a scientist is dogmatic. Okay, well, you have a historical phenomena. Science involves a method of looking back at nature. And if you look to nature for your truth, then you escape metaphysics, because you're doing real physics. And if you want to call it a religion, it's a very different kind of religion, because even though it could be filled with dogmatists, the religion isn't dogmatic. And eventually somebody has the chance to come along and change that worldview, even though there was dogma. But when you go to your intuition, or somebody goes into their intuition and writes a book, and then you go to the book, that's a totally different thing. Because then nature is wrong, nature is ugly, nature is the imperfect copy, nature is the liar, and your intuition is the truth teller. Okay? And that's true dogma. That's a dogmatic philosophy, right? And you can go the other way, by the way. You can have a fundamentally dogmatic philosophy like Christianity, and you could have a generation of people that are, as individuals, fundamentally non-dogmatic and are open-minded, living within that philosophical structure, right? So you could have an open-minded religion that's ostensibly dogmatic in itself, that happens to be open-minded because of it's filled with a certain kind of people that aren't actually dogmatic, that are open-minded people. And you could have a closed-minded school or science that is fundamentally, the framework is non-dogmatic, but it just happens to be filled with dogmatic people. And in the case of science, that's especially possible, because if you have someone like Newton come along and show these incredible truths, well, of course people can just become enthralled with it, and it can attract people that like certainty, that tend towards dogmatism. But it should be, you should think about it twice or three times or four times before you call that pursuit of natural philosophy dogmatic, because fundamentally It is not dogmatic if you're willing to go back to nature to check what you think you know and change your ideas to fit that instead of the other way around. There is a fundamental reversal between those two approaches to life. And the fact that you can have a system and then people working within that system at conflict with each other, you should not let that confuse you, I don't think. Now, one thing, Kurt, you're saying a lot is that instruments are built on a belief structure. And you keep implying and even saying sometimes that that means you're going to get what you expect. Well, no, for the last few decades, people have started to believe in supersymmetry theory. And with that belief in mind, they built the Large Hadron Collider. And they expected to see some of the particles predicted by superstring theory. And they didn't. So you can eliminate what you believe. You build a device. Like let's say, here's a simple example. Let's say you believe that ghosts are ultraviolet. And some people can detect a little bit of ultraviolet. Some people can see further into the ultraviolet than others. And so let's say you believe that ghosts are real and that the light that is ultraviolet light. So you make an ultraviolet camera. Now, how do you know it's an ultraviolet camera? Well, you have, you obviously know what ultraviolet is. By that time, you have an idea of what you are calling ultraviolet, a certain wavelength of light. You've used that to, the sun creates it. You could have an ultraviolet filter that only lets through ultraviolet, or you can make an ultraviolet lamp. You make your camera, you take a picture of that, and you see, oh, look, yeah, I see the ultraviolet from the sun. Oh, look, I have an ultraviolet lamp. I can take a picture of it with my ultraviolet camera. Then you go to a haunted mansion and all over the earth, and you take pictures, and you never see anything. Places you were sure, just as much as you believed that your device was an ultraviolet camera, and just as much as you believed that ghosts were visible in ultraviolet light, you believed that some of these places you went were haunted, and then you see nothing with the ultraviolet camera. At that point, you have to eliminate at least one of the following two ideas: that those places were haunted, or that ghosts are visible in ultraviolet light. You have to give up one of those two ideas. Now, you still get to choose which it is, but this is a process of elimination. So just building a detector based on your theory doesn't mean you're going to confirm your theory. Quite the opposite. It's giving nature a chance to have a say. You build your device based on beliefs, you take the device out into the world, and you find out from nature something about your beliefs. Okay? And you're ignoring that, I think, Kurt. And there's a spiritual ramification. I made a half-hour video to you on this, but the audio didn't come through. Why was that? And so I'm preparing to make you another one on the spirituality of this and my own path to believing this is a spiritual set of issues that I'm raising for you. I guess what I'm saying is having a belief is not a problem, right? It's how you hold the belief, what you think about the belief, beyond that you have it. What do I think about the belief? I believe it's true. Yeah, no, beyond that, what do you think about things that you believe are true and false? Not whether you're willing to change it or even how much you're willing to change it, so much as that is important, but so much as what would it take for you to change it? And I'm telling you, the fundamental issue is, are you going to go back to nature? And what is nature to us humans, to a mammal's brain? It's a flow of perceptions, all of our perceptions. That's what nature is. Now, this materialist idea that nature is a particular thing, or it's made up of gears and BBs or clay, no, that's already getting into our theories about what the stream of consciousness is telling us. Nature at its most fundamental level for human beings is the flow of perceptions. Okay, and if you're willing to go back to the flow of perceptions to check your ideas, and when they fail to change them, then that is fundamentally non-dogmatic. And if you're a scientist and you say that's what you do, but you're actually dogmatic because you're a human being and push comes to shove, you prefer your ideas to what nature is telling you, well, that's just another matter entirely. The fact is, there's a big difference between believing your ideas and calling nature wrong, or believing in nature and calling your ideas wrong. And as a skeptic, basically, I'm in the position of saying, well, strictly speaking, in a classical sense, yeah, all my ideas are wrong, but they're better than the ideas I had in the past. And how do I know? Because I checked the ideas I had in the past against nature, and they failed in some way. So through a process of elimination, though I haven't found the point, because all boundaries are blurry, I have definitely localized what's going on. I have relative intensities, and those intensities have spatial properties. This is another reason I don't really like when people badmouth space or time. True, I don't think space and time are exactly as we perceive them. I'm quite sure that they can't be exactly as we perceive them. But space and time are very important things, because the concept of locality is important, and that's where spread functions come in. Dogmatic scientists slow things down, but science, as this process of checking with nature, and where nature is our flow of perceptions, and it's whatever's causing our flow of perceptions, whether it's a computer, a dream, whatever is causing our flow of perceptions, that's actually nature. That will overcome the dogmatists. So it wouldn't matter if you had 1,000 years of dogmatic scientists believing in, Ptolemaic astronomy. The process of going back to nature will eventually overcome that. All right. And in a dogmatic system where you go back to the Bible, for example, that's simply not the case. No amount of time will necessarily overcome that. But people are basically natural philosophers. We've evolved to be that. So even dogmatic systems will eventually be overcome, because human beings will eventually notice that nature is disagreeing with their pretty ideas. Plato will die before it happens for him personally, but give it a couple thousand years. And even if you have a system designed to ignore nature, badmouth nature, and criticize nature in favor of ideas, it too will be overcome eventually. The nice thing about science is that we acknowledge that this is a process that we want to embrace, and it makes it faster. Perhaps too fast. That's one of the legitimate complaints Barklord convinced me of, though I think it's a positive danger. I think it's something like fire that we just need to get control of. But it is possibly a complaint that having a natural philosophy can make change come too rapidly. So science is many things, and it's not perfect. But Kurt, I think you're scapegoating science into your cell phone. But I do like you, though, and I really want to be able to talk about these things with you. And this is not the video I was talking about that I would like to make for you privately, to talk one-on-one. Or perhaps we should just talk by Skype. Maybe that would be a good idea. All right. Cheers.